everybody. This is lecture 16.1, Is Abolition Possible? In this chapter and in this lecture, we are really getting to the point of Davis's work, Are Prisons Obsolete? So, if prisons were abolished, what would we do to replace them? That's the question that Davis is posing. That is the major stumbling block for the prison abolition movement. And the reason is that prisons are seen as the only way to deal with those who commit crimes. Because us humans have a hard time considering other possibilities and other social realities. And it's important to remember that we used to punish people with pain, right? We used to do it through corporal punishment, but now we punish people with time. So we punish them by locking them in a little room for years and years and years. And the question posed by this entire book then is, has the time come to do something else other than locking people away? Is locking away actually doing what we want to do, or the best thing for society? I.e. the question, are prisons obsolete? Another question then is, if prisons are abolished, what would we do to replace them? And Davis is very clear in this final chapter that there is no direct replacement for prisons. And if there was a direct replacement, it would likely be as messed up as the prison system is. And I think that's a really good point. And when I was reading this through, I was thinking, if we would ever achieve world peace, right, if we were able to stop military conflict in this world, it wouldn't be because we had a perfect army, would it? No, it would be because we did other things. It wouldn't be because we had the most perfect army patrolling the world. It would be because we did something else. So if we were to have better prisons, it probably wouldn't be because we made perfect prisons. It would probably be that we did something else with our society. It would be different solutions. So Davis posits that we need to think about prisons as a set of relationships. And it's if we think about it as a set of relationships, it is easier to think about alternatives. So to address each of the structural problems that exist in prisons, we have to restructure society itself. And that's a gigantic job. That's a huge job. That if we would do this job, we would live in a different society. And a lot of the touchstones here are that we live in a messed up society, and because we live in a messed up society, we need prisons as a place to throw basically the people that have been broken by society. We dump them in prisons, for lack of a better way to put it. Abolishing the prison system would likely impact every social structure that is currently linked to prisons. So if we got rid of prisons, we'd have to redo how we do police systems. We'd have to redo the court system. We would have to change how some corporations operate. We would have to change how we work our government systems. And those are just a few systems that would be impacted. We would have to find places for all of the places that are people who are prisoners to currently live. And we need to develop a series of solutions to the prison industrial complex that would impact every social structure that is linked to prison. That's a bit of a reiteration, but reiteration can be good. So, Davis posits in this final chapter those changes we would have to make to our society to change, to get rid of prisons. And many of these are problems in our societies that most of us want to get rid of anyway, right? So any of these could have its own social movement. And Davis is positing that if you want to get rid of prisons, you have to address all of these problems. So, decriminalizing drug use is Davis's first solution. Drug-related crimes make up a large portion of prison inmates, and Davis argues that we could develop community-based programs to help deal with drug problems and universally make drug treatment programs available. As it is in the United States, real, meaningful rehabilitation programs where, someone goes away for a month or two and detoxes in something like a hotel, that's only really available to wealthy people. Davis posits that we should make that available in a more broad scale, maybe a less fancy way, for anyone that wants it. And in order to be an abolitionist alternative, these programs would have to be voluntary. We can't sentence people to going to these programs. We would have to offer them these programs and have the people do it themselves. But she does make the allotment that if the person is a dramatic and real danger to themselves, that maybe locking them away might be an option, but it probably wouldn't be the best option to get someone not addicted anymore. If you want to learn more about what decriminalizing all drug use, not just something like marijuana, would look like, you could read up on Spanish drug laws. I think it's Spain. It might be Portugal. Sorry about that. I think it's Portugal. Portuguese drug laws. The Portuguese government made all drug use legal, and they took the funds that they would put toward putting people in prison and putting them toward rehabilitation facilities and rehabilitation programs. And that government in that country has seen good results. So it's something to look at. It's a possibility. Davis also says that we need to revitalize American education if we want to get rid of prisons. So we must start seeing schools as being more important and be given more funding than prisons are. And that is, that's I think something most people would like to see anyway, right? Davis further argues that we need to demilitarize schools, because by militarizing schools with armed security guards, with lockdowns where students can't come and go out of the schools, with these really strict movement procedures, we effectively are socializing our students to being prisoners. And we need to stop labeling students who have minor violations as being delinquent, as being bad kids. This can be linked back to sociological labeling theory, and there's a lot to be said right there on that one. Number 3, Davis states that we need to treat healthcare as a right and not a privilege, and that the healthcare system in this country should be free and available to all. Well, what does this have to do with prison? Well, healthcare, if it's not a scarce resource, if it's available to everyone, and especially if mental health care is available to everyone, then maybe we would see fewer crimes, both from people being desperate to get medical care and stealing money, but also people with certain medical conditions that may be more prone to committing crimes. If they can get that help, then maybe that would lessen the need for a prison system. We need to decriminalize sex work, according to Davis. So a large percentage of women who are in prison are there because of their work in the sex industry. And if we decriminalize sex work, we will lower dramatically female prison populations. And that's pretty solid. There's some good evidence there. And because selling sex is illegal, only the most desperate of people tend to do it. And desperate people are inherently vulnerable and be more likely to be exploited by pimps. So if you would make selling sex legal, then you would have less abuse of people who sold sex, it would be a very systemic problem. There are a lot of opinions about this one. There are interesting conversations to be had. I'm not going to say I absolutely agree with this statement, but it is certainly something that, if there was a real ballot initiative that we were voting about, I would really closely listen to both sides. I could be persuaded. As far as this one goes, I'm very much on the fence at this point in my life. Immigrants' rights. So, meaningful and compassionate immigration policies. And this doesn't really impact prisons because people aren't really in prison because of illegal immigration. They're in immigrant detention centers. And those are mostly private and almost impossible to study. So, but they are their own part of the prison industrial complex. And they are their own part of those private prison corporations. So if we want to get rid of all of that, we need to change the way we do immigration in this country. We have every reason to believe that those places are very unpleasant. Keep in mind that they routinely detain entire families, including children, that didn't make a choice to be there, right? And they do not grant those detainees constitutional rights, right? So the same rights that most of us are given, they are not granted. And that is deeply troubling in a democratic society. And so compassionate immigration reform would absolutely eliminate this aspect of the prison industrial complex. Living wage programs. This goes directly to sociological theory, and especially Merton's strain theory, where there's a direct causation between living in poverty and criminality. If you live in poverty, you're dramatically more likely to break the law because you want to try to get something for your family, right? Whether it's food, whether it's, just something nice that you, like a PlayStation or something, right? You have needs and desires, and if you can't get it through money, you try to get it through another way. In most parts of the country, it is legal to pay people less than a living wage. Social scientists at this point say that a low estimate for a living wage would be somewhere around $15 an hour. If you make less than that, we say that it would be difficult to support a family for less than $15 an hour. That's what we call a living wage. And if people are able to support themselves and their families, they'll be less likely to break the law. And also, if people are able to support their families and support themselves and be happy in their lives financially, they are less likely to abuse drugs. And then that takes us back to talking about drugs too. We need to maintain and repair our welfare programs, our public assistance programs. And as I just stated in Solution 6, there's a direct causation between poverty and criminality. So, if you are physically suffering, if you don't have enough food to eat, if your family is in physical danger in one way or another because you can't afford something, then you're more likely to break the law. And if people receive assistance from the government, then when they're in a hard financial situation, they're less likely to commit a crime because that situation is taken care of. And additionally, if people know that the government is going to take care of them, then they're less likely to try to commit a crime to squirrel away some money for the future when they may need it to. Community-based recreation programs. So there is a certain truth to what your mother said, what your guardian said in your teenage years, that if you keep busy, you'll stay out of trouble. There is a certain social science evidence to back that up. Additionally, it builds community solidarity. So when people know each other, when there's a strong sense of community, you're less likely to hurt other people in your community because you know them and you like them, or you at least know them. You don't have to like them. And you're more likely to help other people in your community when they need help. And this right here, these community-based recreation programs, these are present in rich communities. and they're not present in poor communities. And in those communities that have community-based recreation programs, you do see stronger communities and you do see lower crime rates. So that's another area where our society is a little bit unequal. Davis states that we need to rationalize the way we treat convicted criminals. So she says, and social scientifically I have to back this up, punishment shouldn't be because it feels like justice, right? So crimes that are the most harmful to society are often punished lightly. So things like white-collar crime. Embezzling, which has the potential to bankrupt thousands of families in one act, right? Taking millions or hundreds of millions of dollars from a company. That could take away the retirement of thousands of people. But one bank robber and an embezzler would have probably a light sentence of no more than 5, maybe 10 years. A bank robber, though, that made away with $5,000 would probably get a minimum of a 15-year sentence. And that's problematic. So we need to punish people in a rational way in our society. If they're poor and they're committing crimes because they're poor, maybe they need job training instead of being thrown away for robbing a convenience store, right? And the real thrust of that is punishment should be based on reforming criminals to improve our society, not to just make the criminals feel bad about what they did. So in closing, Davis makes the argument that if we want to abolish prisons, our society must fix these problems, right? So if we fix these problems, prisons will just go away. We need to decriminalize drug use, revitalize American education, treat healthcare as a human right, decriminalize sex work, reform our immigration policies, pass living wage laws, repair and maintain welfare programs, build community-based recreation programs, and rationalize the way we treat prisoners. Now, this may seem impossible, but these are things that do need fixed in our society. I mean, these are real social problems, and if we could fix these problems, we might not necessarily get rid of prisons, but we'd have a better society. And if we fix these problems, we might get rid of prisons, and then we probably would also have a better society. So, regardless of whether you completely agree or not with Davis's arguments, I hope you picked something up from this book. I hope you added something to your perspective on the issue. And I look forward to our conversations in this regard, and I look forward to your final papers. Thanks.